Let's do it, Peggy. I'm ready. What do you think?
I am ready to roll. Well, why don't we'll do a couple housekeeping things while we're giving people an extra 30 seconds here. So, this webinar is going to be recorded and we will get you the recording and the slides. So if you miss something, don't worry about it. You'll have all that to refer to or listen to again. And Matt and I love questions, so please don't be shy. Please put your questions in the Q&A as opposed to the chat. It gets captured and you can be anonymous. So if you want to ask something that's a little bit more personal, you can just click that box and nobody will know who's asking the question. We will probably ask you to put something in the chat at some point. If we do that, then definitely put it in the chat. And we'll remind you because sometimes people forget, but definitely if you could keep your questions in the Q&A, that's one place for us to look. Just a little easier, and it has the other advantages that I just talked about. So but I would like to see, or we would like to see, if you could just put in the chat the graduation year of your child. I'm thinking we probably have a lot of 2024s here tonight, graduating 2024, but just always good for Matt and I to see who we're talking to in case we've got any earlier parents, which would be fine. Looks like so far it's all 2024.
Yeah, great. And that's oh, there you go, Peggy.
There's
we got
some twins. I have twins too.
We're talking to the twin master here. Yeah, so and it looks like, and Sherilyn is saying it, we probably do have exclusively 2024 outside of maybe some folks that have younger or older siblings as well. So I guess without further ado, and kind of a decent segue is in terms of your questions, I think this is an awesome opportunity to ask them, right? I mean, I think, we're going to do our thing and talk about what we think is the things that you guys should be learning about and thinking about at this stage of the process. But we want to make sure we're specifically hitting on the stuff that's keeping you up at night, right? And again, you can do it anonymously if that's your preference. And I think I would be shocked if we wouldn't be able to provide you the answer in real time here. And if we can't, for whatever reason, we'll go find out what that is and we'll make sure that we get it to you tomorrow. So by quick way of introduction, my name is Matt Carpenter. This is my colleague and good buddy, Peg Keogh. I'm one of the founders at College Aid Pro. I've been living in this world. So the class 2023, right? Your buddies that just graduated here. That was my 18th class that I've been on the front lines, guiding families through this process. So I got a lot of experience, right? This is all I've done my entire career. It's kind of the only thing I know professionally. And so I like to think that I'm a good resource for you all, but I take pride in guiding people through this, right? Peg and I were actually just talking about it before we went on live here, and it's been kind of a theme for us internally. And that is this, because we're constantly getting feedback from you all, and this isn't something new. It just was a little bit of an aha for us of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I'm getting all this different information. I kind of feel like I'm on an island here, right? With some of these things. And I think that's completely normal if that is describing some version of what you all are feeling right now, right? We say all the time, like, it's your kids and your money. Like, no wonder why you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious and all these things that come with that. But your school, your institution, right? Pingree has gone out of their way to invest in our platform and kind of invest in this education that we provide. And I would just urge you to take advantage of that, right? You've been given what I think is I'm biased here, right? But I think is a really great gift, right? We're here to help people have good income, have good outcomes, right? Have good outcomes. Rather, I wish we could help you with your incomes, but have good outcomes here, right? And we want to be that North Star. Like, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that. Like, follow us, and we're going to be here throughout this entire process, and in whatever capacity you want to interface with us. I think you're going to be in good shape if you just kind of pay attention and stay engaged with what we have to provide. We're going to, a lot of you I've seen have already created your account, set up your platform. That's the best first step that you can take, and we'll be in and out of that tonight. But I would just encourage you to, again, take advantage of what you've been offered. at your institution, and because I think it's just one of the best things that you can have in navigating this, challenging and overwhelming process. So anyways, I mean, that's just kind of, I think something that I wanted to get across. So I'm really excited to be partnering with you all. And this is kind of the first step on our journey. And it's going to be a wild ride over the next year and change here, right? Because it's pretty insane to imagine, I would think, a year from now, all your kids are going to know where they're going to college, right? You guys are all going to have the hoodies on and the stickers on the back of the car. The Facebook announcements are going to be done. And that's a blink of an eye, right? So anyways, we're excited to be a part of it in any capacity. And, Peggy, my good buddy here, Jersey girl, by the way, currently Pacific Northwest out in the Seattle area, but a true Jersey girl. And
not far. I came from New Providence, so not far
right.
from Angry at all. So
that's right. So and Peggy's been through it, right? I mean, she's got a ton of experience with this professionally, but she's put her twin kids through it, which I think is one of our best credentials. But Peggy, I'll let you introduce yourself, and we'll get it rolling.
Yeah, I agree that probably is my best credential. I understand what you're going through, and we're going to educate you. We know the journey you're going on, and we're going to educate you at each one of the stops on the journey. And the more knowledge you have in this process, the easier it is to navigate it and to cut through there's just so much stress that's not necessary. And then it helps you really interface with your kids better, set expectations around affordability, what you want to spend. When you understand financial aid and where you fit, it's just super, super important. And I'm saying that as a professional, but also doing it with my two. And it was just much, much easier to get through the process. I know it's hard enough with teenagers. And as Matt said, you've got this 1 year. I used to tell the story when I was introducing myself of laying in bed and listening to my kids watch TV and cry. And I started crying in bed, and my husband's like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to hear this crying next year. Crying, not going to hear this laughing, and they're not going to be in the house anymore. They're going to be on to that new chapter." And so it will happen like that. So if we, I'd be thrilled if we can be a part of taking away some of that stress and just helping you navigate this financial fit piece. And then you've got Pingree and your great counselors there to help with the other part of the piece. So you've got the perfect kind of trifecta there. So happy to be a part of it. Very happy to. So let me share my screen here and we can get started. So we are College Aid Pro, and this literally is our mission to end the student debt crisis by empowering you to shop smarter for college. And all that means is educating you. Like I said, if you're an informed consumer, you are way ahead of the game and you'll be able to navigate the process. So there we are. As Matt said, it sounds like most of you have already done this. If you haven't, we sent out an email today. If you haven't set up your account and picked the middle option when you do it, called Scholar, there'll be 3 options. It's the middle one. And don't forget to put in your coupon code, because that will back out the $149 first year charge, because Pingree is so generously covering that for you, so that you have this software to kind of guide you along with our education. All right, so let's jump in here. So we need to have a high level understanding of financial aid. And as Matt said earlier, there's just so much information out there through the media, and it's hard to know what's right. You can read 2 different things on 2 different websites. So we're here to educate you on how this works, because you have to understand this world of financial aid to then understand where you fit. So the first thing I'm going to tell you, which is definitely counterintuitive and is something you just won't know unless you know it, is that all these colleges are discounting. So there's these sticker prices, these MSRPs, if you will. They call them the cost of attendance. As we all know, they've been going up for decades, this total cost to pay for a year of college. But all the colleges are discounting those prices, not for every family, but for a lot of families. They do it in different ways. And there's 3 different ways that this total cost can be discounted. The first way is with need-based grants. So as the name is hinting, you have to have financial need for the college to come in and say, hey, we're going to give you some of our endowment money in the form of need-based grants to cut the cost of college. The federal government will also do this in the form of Pell Grants, and then states also do it. So it's not just the university or the college's endowment. That's the biggest place to get the most money if you have need. And we'll talk about in a minute how you know if you have need or not. So that's your first bucket. And that if this is all free money that doesn't have to be repaid, just like the second bucket called merit-based scholarships. So this is kind of the flip side. This is not based on your finances. It's based on your child. So it's their grades, test scores, could be leadership, could be talents, athletics, music. It just depends on the school and how they offer merit scholarships. They usually call them, they almost always call these scholarships. The grants sometimes can be called scholarships, which can be confusing. It's important to know the difference. But those are your two buckets that you want to maximize. And that's what this tool that you have access to is going to help you see what you might get, and we'll give you tons of information about the merit-based options that's applicable to your child. So those two you want to maximize. That's what we call gift aid, the free stuff. The third bucket called self-help, a part of a lot of families' college funding strategies. But it's stuff you either have to repay or you have to work for. It's either loans or work study. So not free money, not bad. It needs to be kept in check, the loans, but that's your third bucket. So these are all the ways that the costs could be discounted. So let's touch on the need-based aid. So the colleges use a very simple formula to figure out if you have need. They take the cost of attendance, their full cost, which is tuition and fees, room and board, books, travel, personal expenses. And that'll get finalized in the coming months for kids that are starting this fall. They take that number and they subtract something. It's going to be called for a class of 2024. It's going to be called a student aid index, SAI. It's currently for the kids up through the class of 2023 called an expected family contribution. Pretty soon we're going to take that off the deck because that's going to be an old term. But in case you have done some reading or you have an older child, it's the same thing. It's just a different name. Some of the calculations and what's going to be included in calculating it is different, and we're going to talk about that. But it's the same idea. It's what the colleges think you can afford to pay for 1 year of school. So they take that number and they subtract it from the cost of attendance, and that's your need. So if your EFC is $50,000 and the school costs $80,000, you have $30,000 of eligibility for need-based aid. Doesn't mean you're going to get $30,000, but that's your need. If your EFC on the flip side is $120,000, which Matt and I have worked with a lot of people that have very high SAIs through the years, the school costs $80,000. Obviously, you have no financial need. And we're going to talk about the discounts if that's the case for your family. But this is how it works. So basically, the next thing you're probably thinking is, okay, that's interesting, but how is this SAI/EFC calculated? If you have set up your account, you will see your EFCs along the top. If you inputted all of your information in your profile and you got that complete, which is important, you're going to see those. And Matt's going to pop in there in a minute, and you can watch what we're showing you and have yours open on the side, which is really great because we're actually speaking to you as you look at those numbers.
And
So
Peg, to that point, sorry, let me just butt in quickly
Sure,
here.
sure.
So I know a bunch of you have got your accounts set up already, but I think a couple of you have, there's been some confusion or having trouble getting on there. When I do get into the platform in a few minutes here, I'll spend a minute or two actually walking through how to set up your own account, just in case that any of you that are on here are having a little bit of trouble with that. So just wanted to address it. Sorry, Peg, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Okay, so how is this SAI calculated? There's two things that they look at for both the parents and your child. They look at your assets and they look at your income. So let's talk about the assets. They only look at non-retirement assets when they're doing this calculation. So that means if you have a 401k, 403b, IRAs, including Roth IRAs, pensions, anything that's got a retirement registration, that balance in that account is off the table. So that's great. If you've been a big saver, I'm a financial planner by background. I didn't share that when I did my intro. So I love when people have prepared for retirement. That's great, especially when you're starting to think about paying all this money for college. It's good if you're prepared for retirement. So those balances are off the table. Everything else is on the table. So that means checking, savings, if you have a portfolio with bonds or stock, everything like that, CDs, anything that's not in retirement is on the table. 529s, which we always get that question. So that's why we've got it up here. 529s that you as the parent are the owner of, that's an asset of yours. You might be kind of thinking, wow, that's not what I would have thought, which makes a lot of sense because you're saving for your child's the beneficiary on the account. You would think it would be theirs, but it's not. You're not gifting it. It's money that's yours. It can always be taken out and used elsewhere. You would pay tax and penalty, but it's not a gift to your child. So that's a very important thing to remember when you're filling out financial aid forms. One of the most common mistakes that people put in retirement, and they also think the 529s are a student asset. They're your asset. And the reason why that's so significant is kids' assets, student assets are assessed at 20 or 25% in this formula, whereas parents is up to 5.64. So big difference there. The other thing is if grandparents own a 529 or anybody else that's not in the nuclear family, that is not on the FAFSA. That is not disclosed at all. That's not a person in your family. That won't be included. So that's how that piece works. If you have any real estate that's not your primary home that you live in, that's going to be on the table across the board. So if you have a vacation home or a cabin in the woods or something, whatever your equity is, which means your market value minus any mortgage or HELOC or anything, any liens on the property, that's considered an asset that goes into this equation. Your primary home, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, that you live in is not looked at the line, the equity in it at the lion's share of colleges, the schools that only require the FAFSA. But there is a group of schools that do ask about that. They do ask about the home you live in. And the thing you want to remember is you don't want to overvalue your home. You always want to be honest, of course, but you want to find the lowest defensible value for your home. And then there's something called the IRS quick sale value, which we have on here. And as you know, if you've sold a home, you don't realize what you sell your house for. So it's perfectly legit to take 15, 20% off that number. And that's your market value. Because for the schools that look at it, the higher that equity is, the higher your SAI could be that they calculate. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then lastly, a lot of people will ask us, hey, I've got car loans, I've got student loans I haven't paid off, I have credit card debt. How does that factor in? It's not asked about on the forms, but in this scenario, when you're applying for financial aid, this is not a time to be shy. You want to be open with the colleges about your financial situation because they really are trying to get an accurate appraisal of your cash flow if you have strain on cash flow. So even though it's not asked about, you can definitely share that. But you'll be reaching out to the college to do it because it's not going to be a line item on a form. So that's the asset piece. The second part is income, like I said before. So again, it's student income and parent income. And I didn't mention this on the other slide, but assets, the value of your assets is actually assessed on the day you submit the form. If you want to be that meticulous, you can pull up your portfolio and whatever the close of business was, that's what you put on the form. Income is actually a 2-year look back, and we call that prior year. President Obama put that into place. So basically, all of you with your class of 2024 kids that are going to graduate in about a year, all the questions when you look at financial aid forms this fall are all going to be about 2022. So it's gone. Some of you might not have filed yet. By the time you're filling out these forms this fall, even if you extended, you're pretty much going to have filed. So it's important. Now 2022 is over, but it's important not to inflate your income by capital gains. Sometimes people do Roth conversions, which is a really smart, I was talking to mom the other day, really smart from a financial planning standpoint, but now she's got this income that she's got to talk to the colleges about to explain, hey, that wasn't really my income. So anyways, that was a little tangent, but that's how it works. So the easiest way to remember is just subtract 2 from whenever your child is starting their junior year. So it's 2027. You're going to be reporting on 2025 for that year. So with a 2024 graduate, your years are going to be 22, 23, 24, and 25. Those are the 4 tax years you're going to be asked about. And it mostly goes off of adjusted gross income. There are some other add-ins that we'll talk about a little bit here. But that's the biggest driver for students. Most students don't have a lot of income, and there is an income, what we call an income protection allowance for the students. So it's basically a wash. They can make over $7,000 and it doesn't count into the equation at all. So for most students, it's not a game changer because they don't make that much money, but it is asked about and it is reported. So that's income. So what if you're looking at your MyCap dashboard, or you're just listening to me and thinking, hey, there's just no way we're going to be eligible for need-based aid. What do we do? Well, that's that second bucket that I talked about at the beginning called merit scholarships. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt, but I will say, and I know this is true for Matt as well, over half the families we've worked with over the years don't have need-based eligibility, but you're going to have a hard time paying $80,000, $85,000, $90,000 a year times 4 plus inflation for more than 1 or 2 kids. And that's completely reasonable. So I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody likes to pay full rack rate, right? So if we can figure out ways to avoid that, we want to take advantage, right? And I mean, a big part of this process, I think, is controlling the controllables, right? There's certain things that are outside the realm of our control, but we want to get a clear idea of, well, what are those versus what can I control? And let me be really good about kind of mastering my domain that I do have some say over, right? Which is, well, what schools are we going to target? And, what smaller things like Peg mentioned, the fact that, colleges look at any money in the student's name with a lot more emphasis than they do money in the parent's name. So if we have if our kid has 10 grand in their savings account, well, let's be smart and add our name onto that savings account and report it as a parental asset, not a student asset, right? That's just a small example of things like all those little decisions add up and just kind of stack the deck in our favor. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? That's ultimately what we're trying to do. And the other thing I just wanted to mention quickly, and this is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I think a lot of people hear that prior tax year deal and they go, oh no, I had a really good year in 2022, but that was an anomaly. And this year's not going to be anything like that. And maybe not next year either. Or I had these, one-time distributions that happened in 2022 and I'm going to get, really penalized as a result of that. And that's just one example of kind of all the nuances that happen in this process, right? You're not alone if that describes your family. And although we have to present our situation to these colleges in a very black and white manner, right? They're just going to ask you point blank, what was your adjusted gross income in 2022? It doesn't say, tell us the narrative that should go with that, right? And that's where the onus is on us. We got to answer that question, but then we have to bring that narrative to each of these colleges. And there's kind of a particular part of the process that we call the appeal process of how and when that happens, which again, we'll talk about more next year, but just kind of keep that in mind. If you're one of those families that went, oh no, we're going to get really punished because we had this one weird year and there was an awful time to have it. That's really not necessarily the case. So again, just keep that in mind if you got a little stomach drop when you learned of that piece of the puzzle. So obviously, Peg spent a bunch of time talking about how this need-based part of the process works. And I think It's deservingly so because it's a little bit more complex and nuanced. And I'm sure a couple of you, your heads are swimming a little bit with all those new acronyms and changing acronyms and grants versus scholarships and all this stuff. But for some of you, there's no magic wand that we or anybody can wave that's going to make you eligible for need-based aid, right? Just by nature of your income and your resources, that's just going to be the reality, right? And again, like Peg mentioned, I think for some of you, kind of a really harsh reality. For us, in my opinion and in my experience, I think families that are what we call internally kind of bubble families are families that they don't get need-based financial aid, okay, or not much, right? Very little. But they're truly not in a position to start cutting checks for 90 grand a year. And one of the bigger problems with this whole system from a macro level is that the foundational formula is broke, right? Like what the Department of Education, the federal government says that you could pay each year for college is an insane place to even start, right? And for example, the cost of living really isn't taken into account. Right. And technically they can say that it is because technically it's baked into the formula. But in reality, it doesn't move the needle. Right. They're treating a family of 5 that has a $300,000 household income living in New Jersey that pays some of the highest property or highest taxes, period, right, in the country. I don't need to tell you all the same way that they're treating that same family of 5 that lives in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota. Right, which is just bonkers, right? But that's kind of the deal. So that's one of the controllables that we really can't change, right? We just have to understand that and then work within the system as it is today. So all that is to say, some of you in all likelihood, we're not going to get need-based financial aid. We don't want to or can't pay $90,000 a year for college. So what are some things that we can do to receive discounts or at least maximize our odds of getting meaningful discounts? And there's a few things we'll talk about, right? Obviously, the number one, kind of the lowest hanging fruit is like, well, let's apply to some schools where my kids are going to receive scholarships. Where is that? What schools? How much? Are they schools that my kids also excited about, right? And I think that you'll find the answer is yes. And I also think that you guys have the cheat code, right? I believe in my guts that the best platform that exists is what you all have access to. And I'm going to walk through it in a couple minutes here to show you how you can find schools that are likely to give you or give your student merit-based scholarships and give you a really good idea of how much is that likely going to be, right? The second point here that I just want to hover over for a second is that some of you, again, have already confirmed I'm not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid. The platform told me that my EFC was $150,000, right? And fortunately, there's no colleges that cost $150,000 a year. However, I think a lot of folks, once that's confirmed, or maybe that's your intuition, you say, okay, well, I'm not going to complete the FAFSA, or I'm not going to complete the CSS profile. And for some colleges, in order to be considered for scholarships, you have to complete the FAFSA, or sometimes you have to complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile, right? We pick on NYU a lot, not in a bad way, but they're one of those schools that even if you want to be considered for scholarships, regardless of your financial aid eligibility, you need to complete the FAFSA and CSS profile for them to even throw your hat in the ring. Right. And so that's something that we just like to flag because, again, it's not common knowledge. It's a little bit counterintuitive. And so we want you to just think about that. I'm going to skip down to the fourth point here. Or I guess kind of fourth and fifth in the same vein is, obviously all these schools are different, and whether or not you're going to be eligible for scholarships is going to be predominantly dictated by your student, by the institution that we're talking about. And then obviously that changes not only from one year to the next, but even within a year, right? We'll see schools change their scholarship policies within a year based on kind of the demand that they are getting and the types of applications that they're getting, et cetera. And we work very, very hard and have an unbelievable data team that lives in that world every day to make sure that we are, keeping up with these changes in real time. And kind of in the same breath, I think it's also important to note, and again, in my experience, this isn't common knowledge for everybody. Not every college offers scholarships, right? And that list is growing. There's now about 100 colleges in the country where scholarships don't exist, right? So every Ivy League school, for example, right? Peg usually tells everybody that she meets within the first 5 minutes that she's a graduate of Cornell University, right? She went to the Ivy League. That's, again, if you ever had the fortunate enough to meet her face to face, you'll likely experience that. But
You guys have to understand that he's just picking on me, because that's not true at all.
That is not true. I kid.
Yes,
I jest.
it's not true.
But what is true is that there's nobody that's at Cornell or Princeton or Dartmouth or Harvard that's there on a scholarship, right? The same is true for most of the NESCAC schools, Amherst and Williams and Middlebury and Tufts, Bates, Bowdoin, Colby. There's no scholarships there, right? Even schools that are, you don't necessarily think are going toe to toe with Harvard, Franklin and Marshall in Pennsylvania, or what am I thinking of? What's the William and Lee, or what's the one in Virginia, Peggy? It's Washington and Lee in Virginia, right?
Lee, yeah.
No scholarships there anymore, type of deal. So anyways, I say all that because we've had enough challenging situations where with these really talented students and are only applying to these 8-10 schools where scholarships just don't exist. And I'm not saying, like, listen, if we get into Princeton, we're going to figure out how to make Princeton happen, probably, right? For most of you, but I just don't want to apply to only 8-10 schools where there's zero chance of scholarships. And this is, again, to me, what is another controllable is just hedging our bets. Let's make sure that we apply to a couple of schools that we know, or at least we know are very likely to offer us a meaningful scholarship, even if that's, and this kind of skipping to my next point here, even if we're just going to use that offer as leverage to go back to whatever our top choice ends up being, right? And this is part of this concept, and I already teased it a little bit earlier, of when we get into that appeal part of the process, right? So we've been accepted to colleges, we've got offers. Now we want to go back and see if we can squeeze a couple more bucks out of these guys. One of the best ways to do that, especially if we're not eligible for need-based aid, is to apply to competing schools and using those offers against one another, right? It's very, very common that we will recommend to families that we work with to say, hey, a great example in my backyard here, right, is I live in the Boston area. We had this great engineering school in Central Mass, WPI, right, Worcester Polytech Institute, and RPI in New York, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Both incredible engineering schools that are fierce competitors with one another. And it's not all that uncommon that we'll have families that loved one school and hated the other for whatever reason, right? But we will firmly recommend, for me, I will make them apply to that competing school, knowing they have zero chance of zero intention of attending. We just want to use that as leverage, right? So that's something that, again, that we can kind of control as we're building out this list of colleges here. And Peggy, if I could, I'll share my screen and jump into the deck here, or jump into the platform rather. So just quickly, it looks like at least one of you that was having some issues getting in here, we got that resolved. But if you haven't created your account yet, right, do it now or later tonight, tomorrow, whatever. And again, you go to our website, which is, and if you want to just put that in the chat, please.
Yeah, I'll put it in.
Along with the coupon code, and I already did, but just to bubble it up to the top there. Go to mycap.collegeaidpro.com. You're going to go to create your account. And then when you do that, it's going to, it's to say, set up your username and password, right? And then you'll do that. And then after, it's going to say, well, what do you want to do? Do you want a free account? And then the middle option is something that we call Scholar. That's what you're going to want to select. You select that Scholar option. And then it'll prompt you to say, hey, put in a coupon code, right? We put the coupon code in there for Pingree24. Again, if you find us just off the street, it costs $149. But again, your school is generous enough to invest in that on all your behalf. So so make sure you take advantage. And again, I made a note, if you're having any trouble really with anything, I guess, but you know, you can, our support team is incredibly responsive, incredibly I think really, really good. So just write into support@collegeaidpro.com at any time. And during business hours, during the week, I think you'll find them to be very responsive. And raise your hand and say, hey, I'm a parent of a Pingree student. We know very well who's invested in our platform. Make sure we give you guys kind of top priority in terms of attention. So
I just put that email in the chat as well. So
perfect. Thank you. So here's what you're looking at. For those of you that have created your accounts, right? I set up kind of a dummy account here, but this is what you're staring at after you answer those about a dozen or so questions that we ask you, right? We want to know a little bit about your kids, specifically what type of student they are, if they have test scores, put those in, or you can use a placeholder like, hey, here's how they're doing on their practice ACT or SAT. We're expecting they're going to get about a 1,300 or whatever. And you can always change these, right? If you go into the top right corner here and select the profile button, you can change. You could say, hey, what if their GPA jumped up to 3.7, or what if that ACT went from 27 to 30? How would it change, you know, their how we're projecting the scholarships? You can mess around with that stuff at any time. Or if you say, I know my income's going to go down or up next year, how would that impact my EFC? So any changes you want to make in real time will automatically, you're going to see your EFC updated, you're going to see your scholarship projections updated, et cetera. So just kind of know that you can use this as your sandbox as you're going along here.
And let me just interject, because one person asked, and there might be other people. If you set up your account under the free option, up where it says talk to an expert, it's going to say upgrade. Just click there. And again, you'll see that scholar option. Just put in your coupon code and finish up the prompts, and then you'll be off to the races. You'll be good to go either way.
Yep. Perfect. So okay, a couple of things I want to point out as we take a little tour here and coach you through the platform, but also coach you through some, I think some higher level items, I guess, from an educational standpoint. So to further complicate matters, there are actually more than one EFC, right? Or again, soon to be SAI. It's July 15th that we're changing that the actual terminology on the platform. But like Peg said, doesn't matter. It's just a terminology change. It doesn't impact kind of what matters most here. But as you can see, there's this wild spread between the federal EFC and the institutional EFC. The federal EFC is what just about all public colleges and universities use, right? And also a meaningful amount of private colleges. Whereas the institutional EFC is used by a decent amount of private schools, right? And so, for example, as we're looking at the screen here, NYU and Princeton use some variation of the institutional EFC. Now, there's a couple reasons that there could be a huge difference here. This family is a good example of two of the biggest ones. Number one, they're homeowners. Okay, so a lot of these colleges that use the institutional EFC consider your home equity to be fair game, for lack of a better word, right? NYU is a great example of that, right? NYU, if your home's worth 600 and you owe 200, they look at that like a $400,000 bank account. Okay. Princeton University, they use the institutional EFC, but they have their own kind of bastardization of the formula. And one of the things they do not look at is home equity, right, in the primary residence. So that's why you see this as we're projecting the net cost here. It's kind of interesting where the sticker price is really similar. They're both schools that use this institutional EFC, but we're expected to pay considerably less at Princeton. The reason being, again, that they don't look at home equity among some other things. The other big difference here is that this is a two-household family, right? The parents are divorced, okay? Schools that use the federal EFC are only looking at one household, whereas schools that use the institutional EFC usually are looking at both households. So just more, again, in most cases, income and resources, assets that are being looked at when determining your eligibility for need-based aid. I told you really right there. I just told you more than everybody needs to know right now. And I went further in the weeds than I needed to. I want to layer in some education here in terms of the why. But right now, as you guys are starting to build this list of schools and are just kind of curious about what you're going to pay, just pay attention to the net cost. Here's what you're going to pay at this school, right? And this is kind of a good example because for most families, right, it's like, well, Rutgers is going to be way more affordable than Princeton University. For some families, that's true. For plenty, it is not, right? And so that's why it's like, I want you to focus on what are you going to pay at these schools, and you guys have access to this cheat code, right? Penn State University, amazing institution. Your kids are going to have a ball there. You guys are going to have a ball there, but you're going to pay full sticker price probably, unless you're playing for Coach Franklin, right? That's kind of the deal at a lot of these big state schools, right? But there's examples. University of Alabama, pretty popular school now, even here in the Northeast. They're really good with merit-based scholarships if you hit a certain level. So we're getting a meaningful discount there. So that's kind of the point. But if you want, just let's take a look at one or two schools specifically. Just throw out a school that you guys are looking at home or talking about, or maybe it's one of your alma maters, or it's the dream school, you're going to tour it soon, or you have toured it. Just put in the chat a couple of schools or one school that you're kind of curious to see how generous or not they are, because we'll go take kind of a closer look here. So let's look at Stanford, for example. Okay, we can see Stanford, and then also Villanova will be a decent comp here, right? Where we can see, again, this is almost one of those like NYU versus Princeton examples. And then I just put Boston College on here as well, right? Where, where again, really prestigious institutions, super competitive, amazing institutions, very expensive, but then different in terms of how generous or not they are, right? And we can see that Villanova, BC, a little bit closer to the camp of NYU than Stanford is, a little bit closer to what was the one we're looking at in front of Princeton, right?
Yeah.
So, and if we click on any of these schools, guys, you can kind of see the details. Well, why are we getting a discount? Are we getting scholarships? Are we getting need-based grants? What's bringing us down to that net cost? And we can help you with some context in terms of the why, right? So if I want to see, well, for financial aid, here's the EFC that they use, and here's how generous they are with meeting need-based financial aid. So it makes sense as to why this is how much I'd be expected to pay at a Stanford, right? And also we can see from an admission standpoint, here's the average. Good news for this family is if they get into Stanford, it's going to be affordable. Hard to get into Stanford, right? Hard to get into Princeton, and we don't make any indication of likelihood for acceptance or not at any of the schools, but we just have their averages baked in, so you can have some. Obviously, that's what your school counselors are going to do a better job than we are in terms of helping you with. But at least right in here, you can have some kind of quick reference point to what type of students are going to these particular institutions.
Well, Matt, if you click on financial aid again, all right, never mind. It's okay.
Oh, you know what? Well, let me do this anyways, because I want to show them quickly. One of the things that you get with this version of the platform is access to this advanced school search, right? So what this is going to allow you to do, let's say, especially for your families that are not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid, and you're kind of trying to shape out your list, right? You can say, well, go show me schools that are relatively close to my house, within a day's drive. And, let's say you prefer smaller schools, and maybe you have an idea of what you might like to major in, and you can put any number of filters you want in here. But then you can tailor make this search to just say, well, go so many schools with that criteria that are going to give me the most in scholarship dollars, right? And it will automatically do that for you. Right. And maybe, Clarkson University was never on the list, but they got a nice little engineering program, and they're going to give us a $37,000 discount. Let's go take a tour. right? Or let's at least explore it online here, right? And you can do that again with any number of schools. And Gettysburg, really nice school, and they're pretty good with merit-based scholarships, right? So again, this is around hedging our bets type of deal, and helping us again control some of the controllables. If you are eligible for financial aid, you can search just based on that, right? To say that, okay, here's some schools that are really good with need-based financial aid, maybe approaching that Stanford, or I'm sorry, that Princeton, but there's some schools that are maybe a little bit more attainable from an admission standpoint, or is at least allowing us to hedge. So again, I think it's a really, really great tool that as you guys are building this list of schools, you can leverage the platform to give you some more ideas, right? In addition to the direction that you're headed.
It allows you to build the list. There's financial fit, personal, and academic fit. And Pingree, you're working with your counselors, and they cover the personal and academic fit. But this allows you to also look at the financial fit. Figure out, like I said earlier, what kind of family you are. Understand financial aid, where do you fit? And then, as Matt just showed you, can actually search for it. And he didn't show you, but if merit's the name of the game and you find schools like what was it? I saw College of Worcester on there. They have amazing merit. When you go in there and click on it and scroll even further down in the school, we have all the merit scholarships. So you could even see another one that might be not an automatic if you get your app in by a certain date, even a bigger one. So it really helps you remember at the beginning, we talked about all the information out there. We give it to you all. Yeah. So you see all these awards, and it's all there right at your fingertips. We'll project a scholarship if we can, but a lot of schools have what we call competitive awards. So we can't really say, yeah, we feel pretty certain, but you have all the information there. So you can look at it, you can click on it, it goes to the website. So it's very easy to do the research, and it's really user-friendly too. All right, let me go back into the deck here. And as I said it,
and I didn't leave you too much time, Peggy. I blabbered on for a little while.
Yeah, you've been you're a chatty Cathy tonight there, buddy. Okay, I will motor through this because I'm sure some of you are wondering, like, okay, what's coming up down the pike soon? Senior year with financial aid form. So let's talk about this. There's a couple other slides here about merit. You're going to get the deck as I said, so you can look at those at your leisure. So basically, and Matt touched on this when he was in the software, there's two different financial aid forms. There's the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So most schools only require the FAFSA. There's about less than 300, mostly private, that also require the CSS profile. So not in lieu of the FAFSA, but in addition to it. So just like everything else in this process, like your admission apps, when you guys get into doing that soon with your kids and guiding them through that, there's deadlines. So of course, deadlines are super important, especially if you're eligible for need-based aid. You want to meet the deadlines. And it's a good thing. Your kids are used to having to hand in assignments on time. They have to learn to be proactive, on top of it. And you could decide as a family how you're going to do that, because the colleges don't necessarily clue you in when every deadline is. Kind of up to the family to take care of that. Okay. So let's talk about the FAFSA, because you've probably seen some information in the media about how things are going to change. And we already told you that the SAI is replacing the EFC. The FAFSA typically goes live October 1. This year, this is a one-off. It is not going live until sometime in December. We don't know when. The minute we know, we will be shooting out emails to everybody. You're on our list. You'll get it, of the exact date. So it's going to be sometime in December. Just keep that in mind. That's only for, normally it's October 1. The other stuff here about the base year, you're going to be reporting on 2022. That's called prior. And Matt touched on this when he was in the software as well. A big planning opportunity if you're a divorced or separated family is the FAFSA only requires what they call the custodial parent to submit the FAFSA. So one parent's income and assets. If you're remarried, it'll be both parents. the new spouse. But the other biological parent is not submitting this form. So their assets and income are off the table. And the definition of the custodial parent, starting with the class of 2024, which is another one of the changes that went along with the SAI, is it's the parent that provides the most financial support. So if you have an older child, it has nothing to do with where your child slept the most nights, like it has in the past. That doesn't mean that whoever's paying child support is that parent. We don't have time to get in the weeds on it, but just I'm planting that seed. You really need to sit down with numbers and look at all the stuff that each parent pays for, each biological parent. And you want to be honest, of course, but whichever parent, hopefully you can get the parent that's more advantageous to submit the forms with the lower income and assets. You can do that, and you're being honest. So they took one loophole and they replaced it with another one, basically. Requires a little bit more number crunching. So that's a big thing about the FAFSA. The other thing is you're going to have to get what's called a federal student aid ID to submit the FAFSA. The link that's on here is the current link to create it. Basically, you're e-signing with that. The parent needs one and the student needs one. And the person who has twins that are younger, I know it was 2027, each one of your kids will get one. Each child submits their own FAFSA. I mean, you're probably doing it as the parent, but each child has their own FAFSA. We are hearing through the grapevine that this process might change come December. So we'll keep you posted if that's not the link and if things are different. You can go on and try and set that up so it's off your list if you want. Here's a couple tips that we're not going to go through now. You're going to get the deck, so you'll have them. This fall, we're going to do a line by line with you. We're going to go through these forms, tell you the places where the most common mistakes happen. So you don't have to worry about that right now. It's probably overkill. Do you want me to just run with this real quick and then let you finish, or you want to?
Sure. No, sounds good.
Yeah, so the CSS profile second form, as Matt said, mostly private schools. There's a few publics, UVA, UNC, Chapel Hill, William and Mary. The key differences here are this is a much longer form, currently about 3 times longer, and it's going to get even longer than that because the FAFSA is going to get smaller when the new one comes out. So they really get in the weeds and try and turn over every stone in your financial life. As I said earlier, your primary home that you live in is going to be asked about. Some of these schools don't look at it, like we showed you, Princeton and Stanford. Some look at all of it, and then there's other schools in between. And we have that built into the tool when we do our projections. The divorced and separated families, both parents are going to be looked at most of these schools. So what you will do is whoever the custodial parent is will submit it with the child. There's another form that's called the non-custodial CSS profile. The other biological parent will send it. They both go to College Board, which owns this form. So it's private. You don't see each other's information. Then college gets that and looks at it and does their own proprietary calculation for what's called that institutional EFC. So it's different. So for some families, that federal EFC is a lot lower for different reasons. And if you're a business owner, I'm just planting the seed that when you submit these forms for everybody, they ask for your tax returns. If you're a business owner and you are an S Corp, they're going to ask for your 1120S, and they're going to get in the weeds on your expenses and everything else. So a lot of room to have discussion with these colleges when they're giving you award letters if you don't think they're fair. So just keep that in mind. And that's a part of the process that we'll educate you about. So that's the CSS profile. This will go live October 1 per usual. And just a little, it does usually go live before that. So if you're really chomping at the bit, start looking at the end of September. There's another tips and tricks, you'll get it, and we'll go over that in detail in the fall. All right, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and I can be brief here, right? I mean, you guys for the class 2024 are the guinea pigs for some of these really sweeping changes in the system overall, right? That are largely tied to the FAFSA. There's some really good changes, right? All of us are super pumped pumped about the fact that, listen, there's going to be more money for families that need it most, full stop, right? And for a lot of these families that couldn't even complete the FAFSA previously, right, because of language barriers and a number of different things, it's hopefully, in theory, going to get easier to qualify, or at the very least, there's way less question, or sorry, to complete, to actually navigate. But at a minimum, there's way less questions, right? So, and there's some other kind of smaller wins here, but those are the big ones, right? That the process is going to be easier to complete, and there's going to be more money for the families that need it most. That's the good news. The bad news is it's not the federal government that's going to be funding that, right? Basically, what they've done here is say, well, we're going to rob Peter to pay Paul, and we're going to have some other families fund this kind of new program, right? And this initiative. And so who's going to end up paying more are a lot of divorced and separated families, right? A lot of business owners, right? It was previously, if you were a business owner with less than 100 employees, you did not report any of your business assets, savings, bank accounts, anything on the FAFSA. Now that's going away. Now you have to include that if you're a business owner and you have one employee yourself, right? So business owners are going to pay more. Small business owners are going to pay more. And the other kind of bucket of family that's going to pay more is families that have more than one kid, right? There's multiples on here, or one of you had multiples on here. You know, right now, as it should be, if you have more than one kid in school at once, the formula takes that into account and you get a significant break as a result, basically half, 50%, because you have the same income and resources, but you have two kids, or it goes down even more if you have three kids, etc. in college at once. That sibling discount is going away. So these families are going to have to pay way more money. So we've actually started a petition. We've got, 66,000 plus signatures, but and we've worked really, really hard to try to get in front of decision makers on Chapel Hill, but on Chapel Hill, on too much college talk, like, on Capitol Hill, right? But they're basically telling us until you get 100,000 signatures, we're not going to be able to really pay attention to this. So we're 2/3 of the way there, but we're running out of time. We're asking everybody's help that we get in front of. Please sign this. Please share it. Better yet, if you're willing, it takes 30 seconds, not even. Peg just put the link in the chat. So if you're open to it, please take the 30 seconds and do that. If it's not going to impact you, I promise it's going to impact some people you care about. So please do that for us, and we appreciate it in advance. Go ahead, Peg, if you want here. So, and again, we're not going to spend time on this now. This is just more of a tease for something that we'll talk about once we get into next year, right? And that is, but we like to plant the seed early, that just to have the mindset that when you get an offer from a college, that doesn't necessarily mean take it or leave it, right? And we'll get into the method of that madness again next year. But one thing that we want to start and can help our cause here now is that as we're building that list, to try to have some competing institutions on there, again, to the extent that we can. So that's it really for content tonight, guys. And I can kind of, like we said at the top, just continue to follow along with us in whatever capacity that works best for you moving forward. Take advantage of the platform, take advantage of all the education that we provide, the access that you have to us. I would be blown away if you had a question and we didn't have the answer for you or couldn't quickly go get it. So please, again, take advantage of that. You're not alone, right? You are not on an island here. You don't have to make best guesses here. Okay. And we'll send you this in the follow-up, right? You're going to get the recording tomorrow. You'll get the slide deck tomorrow, right? And then again, you have access to all the bells and whistles of the platform for free. So I have firm belief you're already in amazing hands. For anybody that says we want more support than what we're offering already, right? We have a ton of great resources, free resources, our Facebook group, our YouTube channel, obviously the platform. We have office hours every other Monday. There's typically two of us that will just kind of are just hang out 7 o'clock, actually this time. I think it's tonight, right, Peg? Dan's doing it tonight.
No, I think it was last
Okay.
Monday. So it'll be next Monday. Oh,
So every
actually,
other
we
Monday.
canceled, but yeah, because of Memorial Day, but it's every other
Right,
Monday.
right, right, right. Every other Monday, one or two of us are just kind of here for an open grab bag. What are your questions? Right. And we'll talk about what's appropriate, kind of where we're at in the calendar, but that's something that you should think about. And then if at any point you're like, okay, I need more help than this, I want to just pick somebody on this team's brain for an hour, you can always do that. You can do it right through your platform, say, hey, I want to talk to an expert. And then again, we have even more comprehensive help for those of you that are just like, I need somebody to take over here. But again, our deal is in whatever capacity you want, whatever works for you and your family, just take advantage of you have a resource, right? You have somebody that has the questions or the answers to these tough questions that you all have. So anyways, that was hopefully a helpful foundation for you all. And again, we're not going anywhere. I think that's one of our the main things that we have to offer. I mean, this is what we do all day, every day, and we've done it many times over, and we can't wait to do it again with the class 2024. And grateful for all of you guys that have showed up and asked great questions. And we'll be back in the fall, certainly just for Pingree, but again, in the meantime, you know where to find us for anything that comes up before then.
Yeah, summer's a great time to dive into this when you don't have the school schedule and all the homework. It's a good time to sit down with your child and look into some of this stuff.
100%. Peggy, sorry for talking so much. I don't know what this,
I know.
we're not used to doing these on Monday. I think like
I know.
my equilibrium's off or something like that. I don't know, but we'll learn from it and get better.
All right, guys, have a great night.
Good night, everybody.